hopefully I'll be able to share it with Nicole, and you guys can go back and listen to stuff again, and we'll figure out the best way to get that posted. So how many people, is anybody in here not able to set up an RStudio Cloud account? Oh, awesome. All right. And then I sent this, unfortunately, you can share this code link. Hopefully that worked for you guys. If it did, then you should get something that kind of looks like this. So if you get logged into your RStudio Cloud, were you able to see something here that said R Workshops by Melinda Higgins? Did anybody not get that? Okay. All right, we'll take a look here in a second. But you do have an RStudio Cloud account. Okay. Did we get your email? Not sure. Because this is the link. Oh, sorry. Let me go back. So I don't know, is there an easy way for me? I could send this link, because if you have this link, all you have to do is click on it, and if you have an RStudio account, it'll automatically connect you, even if I didn't invite you, I think. I hate for you, you can't type all that out. Do you know if you could forward her the email? Okay. We can take just a second. Or I could figure out, I don't know if there's a way I could post this somewhere quickly. All right, well, while we're doing that, I did want to mention a couple of other things. So for those of you, has anybody in here ever used RStudio Cloud before? A couple people. So it's somewhat new on the scene. It's probably been around now maybe a year, maybe not quite a year. And the wonderful thing about it is it literally is R and RStudio in the cloud. So you actually don't have to install anything on your computer. All you need is a browser. And so it's fantastic for teaching because we can control the environment. We're not having to deconflict problems on a Mac versus a PC, and this person is running version A, and this person is running version B, and everybody has different versions of packages. And anyway, so it's kind of nice that way. And now that you guys have accounts, you can create projects in that space on your own. So if you're having problems with locally installed R, you can use the RStudio Cloud on your own and create projects and do stuff there. So, okay. All right, so I wasn't quite sure when I first started this just how far or how much you guys might know. So hopefully if you get logged in, if you click on this, you'll get a link to R Workshops by Melinda Higgins. And the project that we're going to be working with is this KSURmarkdown, RMarkdown. So if you click on it, maybe it'll say start. Some of you, I think, already clicked into it. But if you click on that, it'll come up with this little spinny thing. And depending on your network connection, it's going to take a couple of minutes because what it's doing is it's I hesitate to say rendering, but it's basically building that project like as needed in the cloud space. All right, so when all is said and done, you should get something that kind of looks like this. And the wonderful thing about this is not only do you guys have access to all the files, as soon as you start playing with this, it will create a copy for you. So like as you're going, feel free to hack on the code. Do whatever you want, change things, make notes, make copies of stuff. That's all going to be kept local in your account. Question? I did. Good question. Yes?
Is there a way to do it so that you could share it with those people who could be working on it, sort of like a Google Docs functionality?
I don't know. That's a really good question. However, there is a piece under the hood. I know this is kind of hard to see on here. We're going to see. I got a new fancy thing. Let's see if this works. Oh, boogers. It went to sleep. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. I'm going to try this again. Yes, I swear I'm going to make it work tonight. All right, because it has this handy-dandy little magnifier. Okay, up here at the top, there's a little button that says Get. Isn't that cool? It's called a Logitech Spotlight. Anyways, it wasn't cheap, but I saw somebody, actually, our studio was actually here over Emory's fall break, which was like October 15th, 16th, and they were giving lectures. Hadley Wickham was actually here. Now, he did like a 2-day major advanced art programming class. That was like $1,800. I'm like, I can't swing that. But they did like an intro to Tidyverse class. It was $20. I was like, so I went to that one. But the guy that was giving the lecture had one of these. I was like, that is the coolest thing ever. Anyway, so I immediately went home and bought one on Amazon. But anyway, similar to what you were asking, I don't know about RStudio specifically being able to work in a partnership, but this does connect to GitHub. So if you've ever done, and I'll explain GitHub here in a second, but if you've ever done anything in GitHub, GitHub has the ability to work in teams and have version control and all that kind of stuff, and you can have RStudio talk to GitHub and back and forth. And that's actually how I created this. So in here, you've got all the kind of usual stuff. And like I said, I wasn't quite sure, but it sounds like you guys have been working in R for a while. So it's the typical layout. Sort of that top left is going to be where you can view code and documents and your data and that kind of thing. And then down here on the bottom left is your console, where you can type in stuff one command at a time and run things interactively. The top right will give you information on your environment. So the environment is basically as you're creating or load data sets or you create other objects, you can view them here in your environment. And then down on the bottom right is basically your file list, but then there's all of these tabs that go across that give you information about which packages you have, plots, help, and there's another viewer window that views other things besides just graphics. But the one thing I will say is the files here, these are all files in the cloud. So as we go, there's a couple of buttons in here. You can actually upload files. There's a button here for delete. And then under, we're going to highlight this again, under more, there is the ability to go in and like download everything. So you could do that. That's one way to get all the files locally if you want to. The other thing, and I have tested this out, when this workshop ends, I'm not going to delete you guys immediately. We'll leave them out there for a little while, but I do plan on using this workspace for other classes and lectures and things. So at some point, I will purge you out of this workspace, and when I do, it's going to ask me, do you want to allow the members to keep copies? And so everything will still get, you guys will still have a copy at the end on your local login. So you won't lose anything from the workshop tonight, I guess is my point. Even if you no longer technically have access to my workspace, you'll still have a copy for yourselves. So any questions? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. So I'll show you what my space looks like. So there's a thing here that says your workspace. So that's mine, and you guys all have one. So when you created an RStudio account, you had your workspace. And then there's this one that I created for the classes and the workshops. So like these are all the people I can tell everybody's logged in and gotten a copy of the assignment. And then, like, welcome to the Tidyverse. This was the Tidyverse course I took a month ago with RStudio. So they haven't purged me, probably because they have unlimited accounts. They're RStudio. It's theirs. They can do whatever they want. But I don't quite have that luxury. And then I have a separate workspace for the courses that I teach at Emory. So, but yeah, when this is done and I shut this down, you guys will still have a copy of the KSURmarkdown in your workspace. Does that help? Okay, yeah.
Do you do anything to get it there? Do we save it?
No, hopefully, all right, I'm going to put this in quotes. Hopefully if I do this right, and when I purge you guys, it'll just automatically, I've got a couple of dummy student accounts of my own, and I tested this a couple times this weekend just to make sure, and it did seem like it worked. If for some reason you guys ever lose anything, feel free to email me, and I'd be more than happy, because I'm not going to get rid of the workshop. I'll still have a copy of it. So, and I have cards up here at the end if you guys didn't get my email. So the only other thing, this was what I emailed out. So this is my presence on GitHub. GitHub is at a really simple level, it's a lot like Google Drive or Dropbox. It's a file sharing repository, but it has the ability to do version control and file tracking and team sort of science. Anyway, so there is a copy of all of these same files, and so everything that's in that RStudio Cloud project is also, there's a copy of it here as well. So that's why I mentioned if you have an account on GitHub, you can actually just come up here and say fork, and it'll make a copy and put a copy in your GitHub account. If you don't have a GitHub account, you can always come here and click download, and if you click the download zip, it'll pack everything up. You can unpack it on your hard drive, and now you've got everything locally, and you don't even have to log back into RStudio Cloud. So that was going to be my actual option if I couldn't get RStudio Cloud to work, but it seems to be working. So anyway, all right, awesome. All right. Okay, so it sounds like we've got everybody logged in. All right, so I'm just going to mention a couple of little things. All right, how many people in here have not heard of RMarkdown? Really? Wow. All right, somebody give me a definition. What do you think RMarkdown is? Yes.
So I've just started learning RMarkdown. But I'd say it's sort of it's a helper tool in part. It gives me suggestions for things with the different expressions in the code. But I'd also say it's a way to compile all of your R code, your documents, and everything into one folder. It's sort of like a binder. It makes all of your sheets and everything make sense and organized.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
It allows you to create code in code chunks, like small pieces, and then you can run it.
Right. Exactly. So it's a way of combining the code, right, the text, so the description of what you're doing, and the output. And so, you know, I work with, and Alex I know does this too, we work with lots of people who are either using, let's say, Excel, another package like maybe even SPSS, SAS, data, you know, name your poison if you will. And so, you know, you've got code running over here, and there's one window with the code. There's another window with your output. And then somewhere over here on the side, you've got Microsoft Word or your whatever your favorite text editor is. And, you know, you start writing all of the text, and you go, okay, I'm going to get this graph just the way I want it. And I'm going to pick it up, and I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to paste it over. I'm going to do the same thing maybe with the table, or worse yet, you actually open up a blank table over here in your text editor, and you've got your output, and you're going, okay, the p-value for this test goes in this row of this table, and I don't know about you, but I have mistyped those, right? And worse yet, right, like you do this, you have this wonderful report, and you go and you talk to your advisor or your mentor, and they're like, that's really cool, but you know, we've got 5 more pieces of data that I would really like you to add, and I'd really like you to update this report. How many people have done that? All right, so that happens to me like all the time, and people are like, okay, we just added 30 more patients, and we really like to get an update on the analysis. And I'm like, okay, it'll take me 30 minutes to run the code. It'll take me 2 days to reformat the report. Because I got to go back in and fix all the tables and fix all the graphs and fix all the labels. So this, literally, when I found out this was coming, I was jumping up and down doing Snoopy dances in my office. How many people here remember Snoopy dances? I'm starting to date myself. You know, the Charlie Brown Christmas thing, right, where he's like, anyway, all right. So you didn't think you were going to get entertained tonight, right? But anyway, but it's this idea, and you're exactly right. So there's this idea of it being sort of like a hub. And our Markdown is kind of the language that sort of binds all this stuff together so that we can look at all of these pieces together and then produce whatever output. It's this way of communicating our results and our analysis and stuff. So, and this term dynamic documents, you'll hear a lot in the literature. And if you go far enough back, the other term that you'll hear is literate programming. So this actually started with a bunch of math geeks doing something called Sweave, which was actually combining code and LaTeX, which is another kind of documentation protocol. So anyway. All right, so the things we're going to go through tonight, I've got things broken down. I've got some very simple R code that is really there as a placeholder just so that you can see like some example code. But the focus really of the whole workshop tonight is on the RMarkdown. It's the infrastructure for combining the code with all of these other pieces, with the output and your text and your formatting and thinking about how you want to present your results. Is that a paper? Is that a poster? Is it a dashboard? Is it a website? It could be a book. There's all kinds of ways to communicate. And so I'm going to take you through some of these examples, including documents and slides. We're going to talk a little bit about how to customize. So this example of suppose anybody here ever worked with CDC or CDC type data, or if you've ever worked in like a corporate environment where you have quarterly reports, things like that, right? Or maybe you've got a report that you have to run for the Southeast region and another one for the Northwest. The thing that you can do with parameters, just like you can do with code, now Alex and I were actually talking about this at dinner, that like if you have a series of steps that you run all the time, the first thing you want to do is write a function, and then that way that function runs everything for you. Well, you can imagine doing the same thing as with a document, right? Like you've got this fantastic skeleton of a document that in reality all you need to do is update the information in real time. And maybe that's, I always think of like quarterly reports or regional type reports and things like that. But we can do that with custom parameters where you take the same document and you customize just the pieces that need to be updated. And so when the data file is updated or you change whatever the parameter is, you click a button and it reruns the whole report. You don't have to reformat, and it's doing that for you dynamically. And then finally, we'll do some examples on dashboards. All right. The other piece that I wanted to mention, so I've put together a couple of online courses. I've got one course on Coursera that is all about this. It's all about RMarkdown. So if you guys want to, or if you're interested at the break or at the end of class tonight, I'll share that with you. You can, anybody in here ever taken Coursera courses? They're basically free. If you want the certification, then you got to pay the, I don't know, it used to be $50. I'm not quite sure what it is now. I'm not going to get rich, so just. But I have a course that basically walks you through all this stuff with RMarkdown. And then I recently just launched a course on DataCamp that's R for SaaS users. So they specifically wanted something that would talk about getting people from SaaS to R. So I wrote that course. As part of that course, I actually used this data set. Yes, ma'am. No, but I have something I could share with you on that. There actually is a package called SaaS. I think it's just called SaaS Markdown, and it does work. It's a little tricky to set up the first time, but yeah, you can do it. Okay. Yeah, remind me at the end, and I will share that with you. But yeah, so the data set I'm going to have you guys sort of play with, this is the data set on abalones, which are kind of like little clams, oysters, mussels. It's in that family. My son wants to be a marine biologist. He probably would cry. He'd be like, no, Mom, it's this kind of mollusk. And I am not a biology person. I'm like, genus, phylum, I can't keep it straight. Anyway, this is the link in case you're interested in the data set. And for those of you that are doing data science or teaching data science, this is a fantastic repository. This is UCI, which is university, I can't remember. But it's, thank you, California Irvine, thank you, I couldn't remember. But it's their machine learning repository, and they have tons and tons of different data sets, and they're all free, and you can download them, and it's fabulous. So the data set I'm going to have you guys work with is abalone data set. All right. Okay, so go ahead and get into your RStudio, the RStudio Cloud. And let me make sure I've got it pulled up correctly here. Our workshops. All right. Make sure I open the correct assignment from me. And once it gets open, click on the file that says rscript.r. So I'm just going to start you guys off, and we'll just take a look, and so you understand what the code is actually doing, and then we'll take a look at how to get it integrated into a document. So I've got this broken up into a couple of different pieces. And so the top part here, I'm actually using the read_CSV function, and it comes from the readr package. So I think, Nicole, tell me if I'm wrong, you guys have learned about how to load a package and so that you can call functions and stuff. So that's one of the things that I think a lot of people get a little frustrated with R at the beginning, in that, oh God, why do we have to download all of these darn packages? You know, why doesn't it just come with the stuff we need? Well, it's because it's very flexible, and so it's up to you to customize it how you want. I think that's in the long run an advantage of R, whereas like with SAS and SPSS and Stata and these others, you have to negotiate that all up front, and then you pay by all the modules that you add. I don't know anybody in here has ever gone through the pain of installing SAS from scratch. It takes like 6 hours, and there's like 500 modules. I mean, it's insane. I mean, the SAS download is over 16 gigabytes, which is just crazy. R is like, I forget, like 500K or something. It's like really small, the bare bones R. And then you can slowly add what you want. So anyway. All right, so having said that, for each of these, so you guys know you have to load a package, and then once that package is loaded, you have access to the functions inside that package. So the reason that I'm making that point, I mean, you're kind of nodding your heads like, yep, I get it. This is something that's often overlooked as soon as we start RMarkdown. So when I run all this stuff, I'm going to take a minute here and just before I run anything. Notice over here on the right, it says my environment is empty. So as soon as I start running things, it's going to come back and I'm going to actually start to see, oh, I have a data set. Oh, I've created this output object. The other thing, and I don't know if you guys have ever seen this function, and this isn't in my notes, but session info. Have you guys seen that one? So it's SESSION info. Let's see, is there a... I don't see any markers, or I'd write it up here on the board. They must be hiding. Oh, okay. All right. Well, session info with a capital I, so capitalization counts in R. But when I run this will actually tell me, oh, don't worry about it. Oh, she's got a secret one stashed away. All right. I know, yeah. So Nicole's. All right. So session info. The cool thing about session info is that it will tell you everything about your environment. And so one of the other hats that I wear and one of my soapboxes is talking about reproducible research. So if I was to take my analyses and hand it to this gentleman and said, hey, can you reproduce this, right? In theory, he should be able to take my data, my code, and reproduce my results. And ultimately, after tonight, take my RMarkdown and reproduce the actual final result, my graphs, my tables, everything. Well, where the bugaboos come, remember I was talking about deconflicting problems. Okay, this person's on a PC, this person's on a Macintosh, this person's on a Unix machine, this person's running this version, that version, and everybody's got something slightly going on. So sometimes it's helpful to come back and go, well, what exactly, what system were you on when you did this? So the session info gives you all of that. And the other thing is, so in addition, it tells me the server at RStudio, this is a Unix, Linux box, and some other stuff. But it tells me these are the only packages right now that are loaded in memory. And so I think sometimes it's helpful if you get stuck and something's not running like you think, run this and, oh, I forgot to load that package. So let me show you what happens if I run this first step. So I'm going to load the readr package, and then I'm going to use it to read in the abalone data set. The other thing to point out, and I know you guys have worked with the RStudio interface, but you can highlight code and then over here on the right click Run, and it'll just run that selection. All right, so a couple things are going to happen. After it gets done running, I now have abalone in my environment. So there's the data set. There's data on over 4,000 abalones, and there's 10 variables. If I run this session info again, now under attached base packages, I have other packages now. I've got Shiny, ggplot, dplyr, tibble, and readr. So these got like added after I did that. So, question.
I only see read R being read there. How did the shiny and GT block get added?
I think they came along. Well, sorry, let me back up. Oh, they were already there. Okay, I didn't realize they had already attached. Normally, they're not already attached. I think it may be because I had already pre-created this. Normally, if I was in my local R, this wouldn't attach. I think it's because I had set up the workspace ahead of time. But this is how you can usually check to see, okay, is the package that you thought load, did it actually load? But yeah.
And why wouldn't my workspace match my session information match?
So Melinda set up her session and everything, and has already run this code earlier today and yesterday and earlier. And it saves the state
Yeah.
it's currently in from session to session for each time you log in.
So yours may look slightly different.
That is her yet.
Okay. Okay, that's probably why, because, yeah, exactly that, because y'all's was created fresh, and I've been hacking on mine for a little while. But the only reason, and I don't want to take too much time on just this piece, but the reason I mention this, when we get into RMarkdown, what RMarkdown does is it actually does a couple of things. Under session, have you guys ever had R crash and you've had to click this button, restart R? Anybody ever had to do that? Well, if your R ever crashes, try this. And basically, it's going to take and clean up your workspace. So the first thing it does is this little broom. It clears the object out of your workspace. It clears like your console, and it restarts the session. And so everybody's always really frustrated with that because they're like, okay, I've worked all this out. My code works great, and then I cut and paste the code over into my document, and then I try to compile my document, and stuff's not working. Well, it's because when an RMarkdown document starts, it wipes the environment. It starts with a clean slate, and it goes, okay, you have to give me all of the information that I need to create this document from scratch. And so 9 times out of 10, when you first start playing with RStudio on your own, you'll forget, oh, in order for me to call this function, it may have been working over here interactively in the console, but it's not going to work in your RMarkdown document because that's a completely new R session, has a completely empty environment. Anyway, it's a subtle point, but I kept running into that when I was first learning RMarkdown. It's like beating your head into the wall going, okay, it's working over here. Why is it not working in my document? It's because they're two completely different sessions, just like you said, so thank you. Your session looks completely different than mine. And because of that, one of the things that's awesome about RMarkdown, because it starts with this clean slate, I could hand you that document, and you start with a clean slate too, and you should be able to recreate everything, as long as I've given you all the instructions, right? I got to make sure that it's there. So, okay. All right, so let me go back and we'll just walk through this code just so you guys can see the pieces. And feel free to run along. So the first part here basically loads this data set. And so we've read it into memory. There is this little function. I don't know if you guys have played much with the Tibble package. It's kind of part of the tidyverse. But there's a neat function in there called glimpse. It's a little bit like str, which looks at the structure of a data set. And so what glimpse does is it gives us information. It tells you the number of variables, the number of observations. It lists out all of the different variables that are in there. It'll tell you, for the most part, these are all double precision, basically numbers. The only thing that's a character, so this is a character variable, is sex. And the sex in here is basically males, females, and infants. And I'll admit, I don't know the biology of abalones, but I'm guessing like there's probably a point at which they have to achieve a certain amount of maturity before you can tell what sex they are. So infants are kind of like gender unknown. So anyway, so there's the data. You guys played with dplyr? Yes. Okay. So in dplyr, so this is using, Nicole, have you guys done a whole lot with the pipe syntax? Okay, good. All right. Sometimes people see that and they're like, what? What's a percent, greater than percent? I'll never forget. So about 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago, I had gone to a summer workshop out at University of Washington in Seattle. Has a fantastic summer series, and they have student scholarships and things like that. Like you can qualify for travel funds to go. Anyway, they have a whole summer series on biostatistics, bioinformatics, and some really neat things in genetics. And anyway, but I went and took one on big data and another one in visualization. And Hadley Wickham taught the course, and I was just like, those of you that don't know, he's the chief scientist at our studio, and he's like the R coding god. Anyway, so of course, me being a fanboy, I went home and got all my books, and the first day of class, I'm standing there with 4 books to be autographed. And I get them back, and I'm reading through, and of course, I made out Hadley Wickham, and it had something else, and it had this weird percent greater than percent, and I was, finally I figured out, I was like, oh, it's the pipe command from the debugger package. Anyway, so you never know what you're going to learn. All right, so these pieces here basically take the abalone data set, and it pulls out some of the variables. So the select function pulls out length, diameter, and height. So, and it's what you would think. So this is looking at the size of the little abalones. And I think these are in millimeters, or it's either millimeters or centimeters. They're little tiny things. And then I'm running the summary command. So you kind of get the flow, right? Like we're loading a package, and then we're running some of the functions from that package. So this is kind of what the summary gives you. This is a workhorse for describing your data. And so Alex and I were actually talking about this at dinner. This is one that I would like to go in and hack the base code, because what's missing? We've got min, max, the first and third quartile. We've got the mean and the median. And where's the standard deviation? This was written by statisticians, right? And the count, thank you, that amount of missing data, right? So that would make summary perfect. But anyhow, all right. Okay, so ggplot, this is doing a couple of things. I don't know how much you guys have played with ggplot, so just go with me on this. It's going to basically look at a plot of the shell weight, the weight of these things, against the number of rings. And so one of the things of the project, and the reason that this abalone data set is shared, they were trying to come up with ways to be able to predict the age of the abalone, and it turns out the abalone age is the number of rings plus 1.5. So it's a lot like a tree. Well, how do you count the rings on a tree? You have to chop it down, right? You have to kill the tree. Well, same thing with abalones. You got to kill the abalone to count the rings. So they're trying to come up with a way of taking all these other measurements to better be able to predict the ages of the abalones without having to, like, harvest so many and kill them. Anyway. So that's kind of the point. So that's what we're looking at here, and it's a plot of looking at the weight of the shells against the number of rings. And then I've got them where I'm coloring and looking at things by sex. And then I'm breaking those into different little panels. The geom smooth overlays like a kind of a smooth fit line. So you get this plot. You guys played with that some? A little bit of ggplot? Yes. Yeah, sure. So the functions here, so ggplot, sort of the first argument is the data set. AES is something that stands for aesthetic. And so, and I'll admit I left a few things off. This is the x-axis, this is the y-axis, and then you can add a color if you choose to. Yeah, so geom point does what you would think. So geom stands for geometric object. And so point, so it's overlaying point, so that's a scatter plot. The next piece, this facet wrap, basically breaks it into 3 panels by, in this case, sex. And then the geom smooth adds this line with the little thing over it. So, yeah, good question. And then finally, this last one, again, without getting into a whole lot of details, basically runs a linear model. And so this first part uses the LM function. So this is doing a little bit of like a small linear regression, and it's modeling rings, the y-axis, by shell weight. And so you need to tell it the data set. And I'm saving the output from the summary of the model. And it turns out if you do this, some model coefficients gives me this data down here. So I actually get the intercept and the slope term, the standard error, the t-test for that, and the p-value. The sample size here is over 4,000. That's why these p-values are really, really tiny. So there's a way to override that formatting if you really want to put it in scientific notation and see that the p-value is something times 10 to the minus 15th or something, but I think that's overkill. But the reason I wanted you guys to see this is there's ways to actually pull specific pieces of your output. That's almost another whole workshop, so I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. But that's what this is doing. So this is actually the little string or the dollar sign here is pulling the coefficients piece of that output out and then printing it. So we're going to see another piece when we make the document of how to format that in a really nice table. All right. So we got the pieces of the code, right? All right, awesome. So go ahead and click on RMarkdown 01. And I'm going to minimize this. Okay. So there's a bunch of things going on here. Let me pull this back up. The other thing I made a note of here was that in here it'll actually do something and it'll put up and it'll tell you. So this is one thing I like about the RStudio Cloud is it actually will look at your file and tell you, oh, it looks like you're loading some of these things. So when I started yesterday and I was building some of these things, there were some packages that I hadn't loaded into my workspace yet, and it would actually warn me, this code's not going to run without you installing these packages. So, so the nice thing is you can come in here and click the button install and it'll do that. So I'm just telling you that way there when you guys start playing with the RStudio Cloud on your own, it's really kind of handy and it'll actually prompt you. All right, so RMarkdown. So we've opened that. Anybody not see that? Everybody was able to see? Okay, awesome. Okay, so here's the pieces, and this is just the top part of the document. All right, so just like we've got sort of the whole RStudio window broken into different pieces, an RStudio document gets broken into different pieces, and each piece has a different sort of function. It serves a different piece. So this top part is between, there are 3 dashes followed by some variables, if you will, title, author, date, and output. So those are keywords, followed by a colon, and then what the value is that goes with that. So title, I just wrote in abalones. That could be a nice long title. Author, my name, Melinda Higgins. The date was 2 days ago, so I was working on this Sunday night. The output, and we'll talk about output here in a minute. That default when you first create one is an HTML document, but there's lots of options. You guys are going to change that in a minute. And it's something called YAML. Bonus question, anybody in here know what YAML stands for? All right, so just like we're calling this Markdown, websites, for the most part, are written something called HTML, which stands for Hypertext Markup Language. Markdown was actually written to be a shorthand for HTML, and RMarkdown is R's flavor of Markdown. YAML stands for Yet Another Markup Language. So we've got all kinds of markup and Markdown going on here, but that's what YAML stands for. It stands for Yet Another Markup Language. All right, so that's the top part. That's like header information, if you will. It's like metadata. I don't know if you've ever noticed this before, like even a Word document, if you click on the file and go look at like file properties, it'll come back sometimes and tell you who the author was, when it was written, all that kind of stuff. So it's a way of sort of capturing that metadata. This next piece is the R code chunk. So this is our first chance to start integrating some of the code. And this first code chunk is very a little bit unique, and I'm going to explain the pieces here in a minute. But just know an R code chunk starts and ends with 3 backticks. So everybody's like, where's the backtick? So on my keyboard, it's actually it's the key that's under the escape key, and it's that funky looking backwards apostrophe. But it's a little more slanted than an apostrophe, and it goes in the opposite direction. So that's a backtick. So you start with 3 backticks, and then you put these little curly brackets, and you put R. And so this lady a minute ago talked about SAS Markdown. It turns out you can actually put in SAS code here. So R Markdown is incredibly versatile. You don't have to use it for R. You can use it with Python. You can use it with SAS. several other, I know you can use it with C. There's several others, and I have a feeling this environment is really going to be, I mean, we're going to see this explode. Anybody in here ever played with Python? So Python notebooks, Jupyter notebooks, it's the same idea. You're integrating text and code and output and everything, and there actually is an R notebook version. But this idea of starting to mix these things in, and all you're doing after the little curly brackets is you're defining basically the coding engine. So which coding engine am I using? And then there's a way to capture that output and then integrate it back in the document. So I have a feeling this idea of sort of dynamic documentation, we're eventually going to move where that will be the norm, I think. I think we're going to get away from these standalone programming analysis packages and standalone documentation. I could be wrong, but that's my theory. Anyway, so that's an R code chunk. Yes. Back. Yeah, I'll show you that. Is it I? All right, let me write that down. Control TR. Yeah, I usually use the keys, but thank you, because I'm really bad with the shortcuts. I just don't know them off the top of my head. And then this next piece, and we're going to kind of continue this. The only thing that really doesn't keep showing up over and over is the YAML. YAML is only at the very top of the document. And then we kind of get into marking up text. And so we're going to play around with this. Question? I'm going to explain that next. You're a good straight. No. We'll get there. All right. So before we dive into the pieces, up at the very top of your window, there's a little thing that looks like a ball of yarn with a knitting needle through it. We're going to knit the document. So let's just try that, and then we'll come back and we'll do the pieces. So up here at the top, click on knit and do the first one. Just say knit to HTML. We're going to run this and see if it works for people. And if it fails, let me know. We'll walk around. Did it? Oh, bummer.
But I tried that shortcut, which might have messed it up.
Oh. Didn't look like it changed anything, though.
So I wonder if this was added or something?
Oh, yeah. Delete that. Just, yeah, delete.
Okay. Try knit.
Yep, it's running. Awesome.
Yay. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Is it working? Did you get something that looks like a document? All right. I'm so excited this is working. That truly, you guys are my guinea pigs. This is my first time really running a live workshop with RStudio Cloud, so I'm really excited. All right.
If you're doing anything where you knit to HTML, you make it a pop-up blocker. If you're using something like Internet Explorer,
thank you. Yeah, and thank you for saying that. I actually forgot to say that. My understanding is RStudio does not support Internet Explorer. So Chrome should work, Edge should work. I think Firefox. I think I forget. I apologize. I am not a Mac person, so that's Safari. All right. I have a Macintosh that someone loaned me, so my goal is to be a little more literate for my spring class because about half my class in spring is Mac. So my co-instructor in that class, I'm like, I'm a PC, she's a Mac. I use something called camel case style coding. She uses snake style coding. Like you get exposed to all of it with the two of us teaching because she does it one way, I do it another. Okay, so here's all the pieces, and you'll notice, okay, here's my title. Here's my name, and here's the date. Those three pieces of information came from that YAML header, okay? So controlling sort of that titling piece, the top header information, that's actually coming out of the YAML. And then this thing here, a glimpse of the abalone data set, right? so I'm going to switch back and forth. That was, I'll come back to the top one. That's here. And so you'll notice we have this text. There's the text. And they're like, okay, well, cool. How did it show up in a bigger font? Well, it's a header. And the header is indicated by these two hashtags. So hashtags tell me something about, this is going to be a header, and then you can look at the style of the header and so forth. So you're beginning to get an idea of the markup piece. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute. But then I ran, so I have some text here, and you'll notice the word glimpse and the word Tibble is formatted slightly differently, and so is abalone. Abalone is bold. And then there was code that was run, and there's the output from that glimpse function. And so down here, it ran that first little code chunk, and it ran glimpse of abalone. And so instead of seeing the output here, it generates the output and like pastes it in on the fly. And then so forth. So you kind of get the idea. So we've got a header, we've got some descriptors. Here's the output from that summary function. And then here's the output from the plot that we did. And then finally down here at the bottom is the output, that little regression result table down here. Question?
Now with the HTML output, it shows everything. Is there a way to mark anything to hide? Or?
Yes, hold that option, because that one's a little, that's a little harder to set up. There are ways to hide things. So that's a good question. For now, what I would say is just, we could always go back and maybe comment it out, kind of, but.
Will it always do that when you do other things as well?
Yeah, the one caveat that I will say, and it has gotten a lot better. I mean, I was so excited about this early on. I was always in there hacking and trying things, and I was constantly breaking stuff. So there have been 2 or 3 times I've actually posted things. I actually had UEG respond to me on Stack Overflow one night. I was like all excited, like, oh my God, he's the developer of the knitter package that does a lot of this stuff under the hood. And so he texted me back. He's like, I don't know, that should really work. And finally he's like, all right, take a video of what you're doing and send it to me. And he couldn't figure it, and he made a patch, posted the patch, sent it to me. I uploaded the patch to work. And we did all this like in a couple of hours. It's like midnight. But the reason I bring that up is sometimes when you knit to different formats, something that works in HTML may not work in Microsoft Word, and that may not work going to a PDF. Most things will, and the stuff I'm going to show you guys tonight should work across all the formats pretty seamlessly. Yeah, so there are some things. So let's try a couple more. So go back and let's click on knit. So since HTML is usually the best place to test it, click on knit to PDF. So when you knit to PDF, there's a couple things going on under the hood. It's actually doing a translation, and it's bringing up another package that's actually translating this into LaTeX, and then LaTeX is being compiled and translated into PDF. So if you don't know what LaTeX is, don't worry about it, but it's another type of text editing. A lot of people in in physics and math and stuff use LaTeX. They like it because it makes really pretty equations. So a lot of statisticians use it. So hopefully you pop something up with some kind of PDF viewer. I actually really like the format that you get in PDF, and there's ways to set up templates and all kinds of things. But yeah, you can kind of tell the format here looks a little bit different. Here's the plot. So I think the figure's kind of nice. I like the way it formats the table. The table I think is a lot prettier at the end. And then I will say this, you can knit to Word. It's not going to open in a viewer, but when you get done, it will save it, or you have the option to click download the file. And so it'll download, just like you're downloading any other file off the internet. And I can open it here so you guys can see what it looks like. And even if you don't have Microsoft Word, I think there are ways to view these in other packages as well. The one thing that gets a little frustrating sometimes with Microsoft Word is some of the text wrapping. that happens. But here's kind of what it looks like in Microsoft Word. And you'll notice too, like the headers are actually in a different font and a different color. There's ways to actually set up different templates in Word and overwrite that. And anyway, it's more tables and stuff, because sometimes tables will wrap, and they like I tried to work it so all this stuff fits. But if you have something that's a really, really wide table, Microsoft Word will wrap, and sometimes you can't quite guess how it's going to. Yeah, you're right. There are these options for setting like widths and heights and stuff. So, but yeah, good point. All right. So did that work for everybody? All right, fabulous. All right. So we may be able to get to do some more fun stuff. All right, let's see. What else did I want to show you? Okay. There are a couple of other options that I'll point out as we go. So up here at the top, there is this little insert button, and this is where you can insert a code chunk. Same thing, this Control-Alt-I will do that. We'll test this. I'll have you guys we'll start with a blank document, and you guys can play with it. But remember, I mentioned there are other kinds of code. So there's something called Bash, D3, Python, RCP, that's C++, SQL, anybody in here that does database stuff, Stan is something else. They haven't added SAS, although you could do SAS, and I've heard that you could do MATLAB, and there's some others. Okay. And the other thing is, you'll notice up here, our YAML actually changed. So when we knitted to PDF, it actually added a line for PDF document, and then it added one for Word document as well. So in addition to using sort of the pull down here, you can also just type it into the header ahead of time. Like if you know the only thing I'm going to do with this document is I'm going to go into Microsoft Word, and you just put it in there at the beginning, and it'll default to that. So.
Will it now knit to all three since all three of them are in this?
So if I just click the knit button without clicking the down arrow, I think it, honestly, I can't remember. Let me just try it. I think it defaults to the first one. I don't think it'll do all three. So I think if I do this, it just creates the Word document again. So I'll say OK. So I think it's just whichever one's the first one. Anyway, but good question. All right. So let me let's explain just a little bit more of the pieces. All right. So we did this, and we talked about Microsoft Word. Okay. So let's play around with it. Go ahead and go in and change the author name to your name, and go ahead and update the date. And so a couple times that I've done this, my son really cannot stand the movie Frozen, because every time it's on, I have to run around the house singing the songs. So I always joke that I'm, what's the princess's name again? Princess Elsa, thank you. And so I joke all the time about that, and he's like, no, Mom, anything but that. And I love teasing him because my youngest niece, she has probably seen it like a million times, and so every Christmas I like pack that DVD, and then I call her. I'm like, come here. I'm like, go put this in, and then I'm like, go get your cousin and make him watch it. And my son's like, ugh. Anyway, he's 16, so anyway. And so if you do this and we click knit, it should change. So there's always usually a question about whether we have to have the quotes or not. I think it'll work either way, but it's usually a good idea to have whatever you're putting in here inside those quotes when you do it. And so you can start to sort of play around with this a little bit, and there's ways to get really fancy with this header. And anyway, so you'll get to see pieces tonight. All right, so the next part is the first chunk. And so we talked a little bit about this, is that, it starts with these 3 backticks followed by the curly bracket and an R, and then it ends with 3 backticks at the bottom of that whole section. And it kind of shows up a little bit in like a light gray. It's a little bit darker shade. Bless you. All right, so the pieces that are up here inside the backticks, I'll explain the pieces. So the first part tells me that this is going to be R code. The word setup is a label. So what I'm doing is I'm labeling my R code chunks, because you could imagine right now this is a pretty simple document. There's only like 4 or 5 code chunks. But suppose you got something really, really long and there's like 30 of these things, and then all of a sudden as you're compiling your document, it crashes and you're like, okay, where did it break? And so maybe we can do that here in a little bit. We'll actually break the code so you guys can see how to diagnose it. And so it's always a good idea to put a label in there so that you can remember, or either do that or do the opposite and leave out the labels. If you leave out all the labels, then when you get the output and it tells you how the document compiled, it'll just say code chunk 1, code chunk 2. It just numbers them, which is okay, but then you still have to go back and you have to count and remember which one was code chunk 12. You know, so sometimes if you label them and those labels are meaningful to you, it will help you diagnose things later. And then after the comma, there are all of these knitter options that can be specified. And so I've got a link here, and I think it's yiwi.name/knitter/options. And so this link takes you, and if you just Google knitter options, you'll get this link. And so there's all kinds of stuff, and there's a really good book, so which I think is online. See if I typed that right. So that's where it's hosted on GitHub. Okay, you can buy it at Amazon. Dynamic Documents with R and Knitter. I think it used to be online. They may have pulled it back. So it's currently $18. So this is a really good book for getting going, and I think it's now on the 2nd edition. Maybe this is a book down. Here it is. The other thing, and I encourage you guys to check this out as well. This wasn't in my notes, but if you go to bookdown.org, and I'm short, so I'll write some more up here so you guys can see it. Bookdown. Has a list of a lot of different books that have been published using Bookdown, which is basically RMarkdown for making books. And this one, this is authoring books with RMarkdown. So this is a book on Bookdown. But anyway, so there's some of these that are out here. Let's see if Yui's other book is out here. Let's see if the dynamic documents. Nope. Some of them are published through bookdown.org and some aren't. So. All right. Anyway, so here's our Markdown book, the definitive guide. So this is another really good one that's out here, and so you can actually, I think this whole book is online. So there you go. So this one's really helpful too. So, all right. But anyway, the bottom line is there's a bunch of these different options, and so include is down here. All right, so the include option tells whether to include the chunk in the final output or not. And so this first one, let me go back up. I'm basically what I'm saying is that code chunk, it's going to actually run and execute all that code, but it's not going to include any of the output from that, like in the document, which is fine because this first one is really setting up the environment of all the stuff that I've got to have for the rest of the code to work in the document. And so that's what this is doing. And so the rest of the pieces then is this part here where it says it has all these knitter options, chunk set, and I'm including these. This took me a while to sort of sort through myself. Is it's setting up these options for all the rest of the code chunks. And so this first one, the only one that you probably really want to play with is echo. So this a little bit gets to what you were asking about being able to hide things. So this doesn't like hide the output, but it'll hide the code. So echo equals false basically says, don't show me the code in the document. So we're going to go back and we'll change this to true so you guys can see how it changes. I included message, warning, and error. So I don't know if you've ever noticed, but some things when they load, you get sometimes messages that show up. And that's fine, and it makes a lot of sense. It tells you something. And so if you're trying to debug, I would like set these to true so you can kind of read everything. But in your final document, you don't want to see written in the document, okay, loading package such and such, it's this constant conversation that the software sort of has with you. And so that's what this is doing. This is setting these options for sort of knitting the rest of the document. The next piece of that setup is actually loading all of the packages. Now, there's all kinds of conversation like, well, can I just load a package in a later chunk? Sure, you can, definitely. But keep in mind, anything that you needed from that package, like if later you decide, oh, I'm loading the Tibble package, halfway through the document because I'm showing a glimpse of something. But suppose you come back, oh, I really want to put glimpse up here at the top of the document. It won't run because I haven't loaded the package. So once the document starts compiling, it's sequential. So it's a good idea and a good practice to have the packages that you need anywhere in the document loaded first, just so you don't run into these errors. But the other thing is, suppose Alex and I are working on a project together, and I don't want to read the 100 pages of stuff that he's written, but I can take a look at the top of his document and know, okay, there's 10 packages I need to load, and then I can start playing around. All right, and then the last little piece of that first code chunk was basically just reading in the abalone data set. So I have to, even though, remember, I was back playing with it, it's in my local environment, but it's not in my document. I have to still load the data so that the document can see it. All right. So we can run, let me go ahead and show those slides. Sorry. We can also debug code as we go, and so we're going to test this here in a second. And so you can go in, just like you can in the RScript window, you can run selected lines, you can run the current chunk, you can sort of play around and go stepwise through these things. And then you'll notice there's a little teeny tiny play button. Those of you that remember way back to cassette tapes, the play button. Anyhow. I can remember back to 8-track actually, so yeah. So I think I still have some somewhere. And so there's a couple of ways to interactively sort of test things in your document, at least for the R code pieces. So I can come in here and highlight, just like I did back in the RScript window, and I can click on this button here and say run selected lines, and that hotkey, if you will, is Control-Enter. And so all it did was run those knitter options. And I could do the same thing with the libraries, and I could do the same thing with this. Or I could, let me do this. I'm going to clear this environment real quick. And I can click this little button and say, run everything that's in this current chunk. Let me test this piece of R code and make sure I don't get any errors. And that happened kind of quick, but I don't know if you caught, over here on the left, there was a little green bar, and it's like processing. So if you had something that was really, really long, it's actually kind of handy to see how it's going and how it's running. So, anyway, but the abalone data set loaded. Yes?
So when I highlighted the whole thing and said run selected lines, I got an error message. But when I ran the chunk, it was fine. Is there any reason for that?
Maybe something wasn't completely selected. Like if you only selected part of it, maybe left out like if I selected this and missed the end parenthesis and ran that line, I'd probably get an error, like it's sitting waiting for me to finish that last piece. So
Does it test to use zero-length variable names?
I don't know.
I got some on both ends. Okay.
Oh, yes, thank you. Good point. Yeah, don't highlight that part, the tick marks. Yeah, you can just highlight things that are actual R code, because really all it's doing is it's echoing it down here to the console, and it's actually running from inside the console.
The tick marks and all that, that's the Markdown language, right?
It is. It's the Markdown language signifying there's a code chunk. So, good question. All right. So this next piece then, this gets into the Markdown part. And what I would say is there's several cheat sheets here. So under cheat sheets, there's a Markdown cheat sheet, an RMarkdown reference guide, and there's also a quick reference. So if you click on that, it actually opens a help window. And you can see how some of this works. So things like, and you always put the Markdown for the most part before and after the section of text you want to mark up. The only differences are like headers. You basically just put it at the beginning. So a single hashtag is a header level 1, which is usually a bigger font. Header level 2 is a bigger font but slightly smaller than header 1. And anyway, there's all kinds of style things that you can play with, but that's the idea. Italics is either you begin and end with a single asterisk or you begin and end with a single underscore. Bold is the same idea, but you begin and end with either 2 asterisks or 2 underscores. You can have lists, either ordered or unordered. The key thing here is anytime you have indentation, you always have to indent by 4 spaces. There's things here for just line breaks. URLs, for the most part, you can pretty much just type in the HTTP : actually just go ahead and type in the whole URL for like a website and it'll format correctly. And then, like especially with HTML, when you do that, there's a hyperlink created and it'll take you to that link. So if you click on Help and click on Markdown Quick Reference, it'll bring up this help window. Well, it did. I lost it. Let's try that again. Okay, there we go. It just took a sec. And there are ways, we won't do it here, but there are ways to pull in or bring images from either off the web or off your local drive if you've got like a figure that is not being generated in the RMarkdown code, but you're bringing over. Like if I wanted to bring in a picture of an abalone, that kind of thing. There's ways to do quotes and some other stuff. We're not going to get into equations, just know you can do them. There are things here. Creating tables by hand is really painful, so I wouldn't do it that way. There's an easier way. There's all kinds of things for formatting references and stuff, so I won't get into that. What I would refer you to is those books. But you can see some of the basic stuff. The other little markdown here that's like around glimpse is I've actually got a backtick at the beginning and at the end, and that one's not listed here in the quick reference. That's a way to change the style of that text from typically from a proportional font to a non-proportional font. So if like I'm going from Times Roman to Courier, so it looks like I typed it out on a typewriter. And a lot of times we do that because you want the code to stand out. So the word glimpse is actually code, and we're not writing like the word glimpse, if that makes sense. So it like stands off by itself. And then like abalone here, I put in the asterisk to bold stuff. All right, so you kind of get the idea. So we've got some text, we've got a piece of code here. So let me do something real quick. Let me clear my output. Okay. And so like with this one, let me run this first. I think I already did. All right, so if I run that, okay. So now that I've got those things loaded, my packages, I could actually run this one, and when I run it, it actually shows me the output kind of inside my document. So I'm getting kind of a preview of what this is going to look like in my document without having to knit the whole thing. And so on and so forth. So like here's the summary output, the plot of the rings. So there's that. And then if I click this one, and there's one more little piece in this one that I need to point out. So this has one piece of code that's slightly different than what was in the R script, and it's the function cable. So cable is a function from the knitter package that anything that is a table output, it will actually format as a formal table, as opposed to like back up here the glimpse, right? This it sort of looks like a table, but it's just text. Same thing with the summary output. This is just sort of formatted text, but it's really just like I sat there with a typewriter and added all the spaces. But this one down here really is formatted as a true table, and it actually looks a little bit different. And it's due to this cable function. So that's what this is doing. So this one's kind of handy and fun to play around with. So
that cable function could be used on those two above ones?
Maybe. We can test it. So I don't think it works with glimpse, but it might actually work with summary. So if you want to try this with me, up here on summary, you can add the pipe command and say, take that output and send it to cable. And I can't remember if I loaded the knitter package. Sometimes it's a good idea. So this is something that you'll also see, and it's probably a good coding practice, but a lot of times people leave it out, which is you list the name of the package, so knitter, followed by 2 colons back to back. And so what this says is we're running the cable function from the knitter package. Anybody in here ever played with the describe function? So there's a describe function and 2 different packages. One's called HMISC, H-M-I-S-C, and the other one is in, I think the psych package. And the function name is describe. So if I have both the HMISC package and the psych package, R is going to be very confused and go, okay, you're asking me to run describe, but from which package? And they give completely different output. They're very different. And they're both actually kind of fun packages. So it's not a bad idea sometimes to list the package name, colon, colon, and then the function. So, but let's try this. All right, so if I run this, yes, it does. So you'll notice the format here now looks a little bit different. So just try it. When it works, it's awesome. But there are times when it won't work. So I'll just throw that out there. Nicole, you had mentioned maybe taking a break?
Yeah, we're about halfway through. So I think
So do you guys want to take?
it's time to take about a 10-minute break.
Okay, perfect. So come back at 8. All right, I'm going to pause my recording. Yeah. All right. So I encourage you guys to just sit down and sort of hack around on this stuff and play and try to try some different things, try breaking some stuff. So having said that, let's I'm going to break it here real quick just so you guys can see what will happen. So let's get a little further down in the code. All right, so suppose I got to here and let's say I was missing a closed parenthesis. Now, first of all, the one thing, and I love this about RStudio, it's going to go ahead and warn me there's a problem here. But having said that, suppose I didn't catch that and I did decide to knit it. Over here on the right, and it goes by really fast. So down here next to console, there's a little window that says RMarkdown. And when I start knitting, and I'm going to do this again, it actually starts processing the document. And so this goes by kind of quick. And so you'll see it parsing, and then it quits. And it says, unexpected end of input 4, facet wrap, blah, 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 blah. But it tells me line 61. So I can come down here. Now, line 61 is going to be the line at the start of that code chunk. The other thing you'll notice here is, let's see, over on the right, there's all these little miniature tabs. It's real easy to get lost. It says issues, but if I click on the output, I can now see it says processing the name of my file, and it says, okay, I'm looking at some ordinary text. Here's label setup with options, so that's the first code chunk. Then there is label data glimpse, so that was the code chunk looking at the glimpse, label summary, label plot. So this tells me that code chunk plot, which is this one, is where I have my error. And then it gives me some more information here. It just says quitting, unexpected end of output. And it's because I'm missing this closed parenthesis. So this is one way to, as you're starting to play around and knit documents, to at least figure out, okay, where is it breaking? Now, you still may need to spend some time diagnosing the code and what it is about the code that's failing. There was one other thing that I failed to point out. So this right here, it says plot of number of rings by shell weight. I'm actually using something here called inline code. So in addition to an R code chunk where you're starting and ending, so I'm running out of space here. Okay. So there's 2 ways to put code in. One is the R code chunk, so where you're putting in a whole chunk of code. So you start with these 3 backticks, an R, and then you've got some code, and you end with the 3 backticks. But you can also do inline code. And so suppose I'm writing a sentence, like this sentence says, the number of rings range from the minimum, to the maximum. And so I'm actually going to use the functions min and max to query the data for, in this case, abalone select rings. So I'm actually looking at the rings variable. And so when I do that, as I'm going along, you start with one backtick and the letter R, and then whatever the code is, and you have to remember to end with a backtick. And so it's a way of inserting a very small little piece of code so that I don't have to go calculate min and max. I can actually just seamlessly have those numbers written into the sentence. And so that was one other piece that I hadn't had a chance to show you guys. Yes?
If you have something in the code chunk before, like a p-value,
Mm-hmm.
based on a random sample, and you've output your p-value, then you can do your
Yes.
p-value, which I just thought was slick, but actually it's essential, because every time you knit, it's making a new workspace. So your
Yes.
p-value in your text will not match what is in the graphic output
Right.
unless you do that.
Right. Yeah, so anything, if you're like up here, so far I haven't like created or saved anything, but yeah, sure, if I had something here, and I'm going to just clean up my output. There's a little, the other thing is there's a little, kind of looks like a gearbox, a little gear wheel here. One thing is if this is getting confusing, looking at output, and you lose track sometimes, okay, which thing's the document, which thing is preview output. You can say clear all output, and it'll clear it so you're not looking at this sort of preview stuff. But yeah, so suppose, let's see, where was that sentence? So here's the abalone ring. Suppose I had some variable that I called A, and I'm going to call this Fred, right? Whatever that is. And then I could actually down here and say, here is my saved text, and then type backtick R, followed by the variable I created called A. And then unfortunately, there's no way to preview this without actually knitting the whole document. I don't know why we can preview our code chunks, but we can't preview inline code. But if I click the thing to knit the document, now I'll have a sentence that says, let's minimize that. So, yep, the number of rings range from 1 to 29. Here is my save test Fred. So I typed in the word Fred. But yeah, so you can do that. So anywhere that you've got stuff that's been created previously, you can actually call that in the output, and you can put it here in inline code. So, all right. So let's try some other stuff. See if there's anything else here I wanted to point out to you guys. All right, so we talked about these pieces. I encourage you guys to play around with some of the formatting. You run things interactively. You can get help. You can also go, and I can't remember, did I have the link? Yes. I also highly encourage you to go to rmarkdown.rstudio.com. And the thing that's wonderful about this, in addition to having tons and tons of good information on RMarkdown, this specific link actually takes you to Lesson 8, which is Markdown Basics and learning how the different markup affects how the text looks. But if you come up here, well, actually, while we're here, they've added this recently, and I did try this. If you click on Try Out This File, notice it says on RStudio Cloud. If you click on this, and you have an RStudio Cloud account, it will open up a project that gives you a chance to play with each of the lessons that are here in the RMarkdown tutorial, which that didn't used to exist. You used to have to just sit there and kind of have one window open and have your RStudio open and go back and forth. You can now do this and play around with it in RStudio Cloud. So that's another good thing for having that cloud account. So, all right. Notice it says temporary project, but anyway. So it will load, and you can play around with it. So I encourage you guys to look at this. The other thing is if you click on Get Started, it actually kind of walks you through this. I think it's a lot of fun to look at the gallery. And so you can get an idea of what things look like. Anybody in here ever read or seen the stuff with Edward Tufte? He has a whole series of things on visualizing data. But Tufte is known for having a very recognizable document style, and so with the idea that like 2/3 of the page is text, and then the far right third is like notes and little sub things. And so if you're interested in that style, there's actually a Tufty style that you can use in RMarkdown. Here's some examples of interactive documents. We're not going to get into this tonight, but just like dashboards, there are these things called widgets. And I don't know, Alex, have you done much with widgets?
I've done a little bit with widgets, but mostly I'm Shiny.
Yeah, so, and I'm going to let Alex talk a little bit at the end about Shiny, but if you're interested in that, click on these and you can get some examples. I am going to take you guys through an example of dashboards here before we finish. Presentations, that's the next piece we're going to do, and I'm going to show you guys how to create slides. Books. You can use Bookdown, which is just our Markdown kind of on steroids, to actually write a book. So, and you don't necessarily, a book doesn't have to necessarily be an actual book. Think of it, if you just have like multiple chapters or you have multiple sections of a larger document, you can organize it a lot better sometimes with Bookdown so that you're not working on this one huge, long RMarkdown document, but things are actually in sort of sections. And there's some other really nice things that you can do with Bookdown. So a lot of people are doing it. Websites. So the website that I created for my 2 courses, I've got a course that I'm teaching right now on quantitative analysis, and it covers both R, SAS, and SPSS. This entire website that has all my lessons and everything, I wrote the whole thing in RMarkdown. So, oops, I've got too many windows open. And so there's lots of different ways to build these. I was just using RMarkdown, but you can build them with Dashboard and some others. Templates. So we won't do this tonight, but a lot of journals now are actually providing templates that you can download and you install, and from inside RMarkdown, you actually start writing the article, and if you click a button, I can actually write one and make it look exactly like it's going to look in the Journal of Statistical Software. Or there's some others, let's see. Actually, Alex was just showing me one for CV that's actually kind of cool. There's another one. They mentioned our journal. There's another one called Articles, but like PLOS One has picked this up now. So if I was writing an article I wanted to get published in PLOS One, I could write the whole thing inside RStudio using RMarkdown, download the PLOS One template, and it'd be ready to go. So again, I see some of this as the future of especially scientific writing. Package vignettes if you're writing a package and some of the documentation that goes with that. Okay, so play around with this. There's tons and tons of information here, as well as other articles, books, references, etc. Okay. Yes, please, go ahead.
Show an answer to a graduate student that claims to publish it. Okay, so there are 2 things. There are quite a few journals now that want you to give a copy of data and code with it. RMarkdown is quickly becoming the preferred format for that.
Mm-hmm.
It has to do with reproducible research. But the other thing is, the ones that I know have templates are Elsevier,
Mm-hmm.
Wolfert's Kluwer or something
Yeah.
like that. And New England Journal of Medicine, and there's quite a few others, but those 3 have an RMarkdown template that you can use.
Mm-hmm. So, and more I think are coming online like every day. It's expanded quite a bit in the last couple of years. All right. So, some options. All right, so let me come back here. All right, so take some time later and hack around on this, see what you can do. If you completely hose something and you need a copy of a file resent or something, let me know. But up here under File, you can actually come in here and create your own RMarkdown document, so you can actually start from scratch. And when you do, you'll notice there's a bunch of options here. The first one is Document, which is what you guys have been doing. And you could go ahead and type in your title, abalones, and whatever you want to put in. And you could go ahead and specify now if you wanted, like, I'm not going to do HTML, I'm going to go to PDF or Word. And so you could put those in. But there are these other options. So there are presentations, and I'm going to show you an example here. They're all, for the most part, HTML type formats for the presentation. There is an option here to go to PDF that uses something called Beamer. Again, it's using sort of LaTeX under the hood to get to PDF. PowerPoint is brand new. This was just released. So I have not tested this out, so use it with a grain of salt. It's like hot off the presses, as they say, bleeding edge. So, but play around with it. I was ecstatic when they came out with Microsoft Word. So the fact that I can now go to PowerPoint is like even cooler. Shiny. So hopefully maybe we'll have Alex come back and do another whole workshop sometime on Shiny. But there are ways to create Shiny documents and presentations. And then templates. So the templates that I just showed you guys, I don't have them loaded in here, but if I loaded the template for PLOS One, it would be here. And I could click on that and it would give me that template, and I'd start filling out all of my stuff and start writing the document with guidelines from them. Okay. So that's how you can create all of these new documents. So go ahead and open RMarkdown 2. And so RMarkdown 2, everything pretty much from here down is very, very similar to what you had before. But you'll notice up here I changed the title slightly. Author and date's pretty much the same, but now my output is this IO slides _ presentation. So I'm changing to a presentation format. The chunks here are very similar. I've left in two other little ones. This is part of the slide template when you create one from scratch, so I just left it in. But just like in our document, these two little hashtags for a header level 2 started a new section of a document. In slides, it actually creates a new slide. So a double hashtag means new slide. This is the title of that slide, and here's some text that'll be on that slide. Here's my second slide, and I have some bullets. So this would be a bulleted list. And then here's the glimpse of the abalone data set, the summary that I did, the plot. So all of those sections are the same. So I've gone from a document to slides by basically the only thing I did was change the output format. And so if you click on knit, we'll use the first one here to IO slides. You'll run it, and it'll open a viewer window. And this is the IO slide format. So I'm going to make it full screen here. And it turns out IO slides has this neat little thing. If you click the W, it actually makes it wide. You can toggle back and forth from narrow. So you have to actually click W on your keyboard, and it will make it wider or narrower. And then you can just kind of page through. So like here's my first slide. There's my second slide with bullets. There's the glimpse of the abalone data set, the summary. There's the plot. The plot did go off the window here a little bit. I just didn't clean it up, but I could maybe play with my size there a little bit. And then here's the table that got formatted. And then if you just close that. And try a couple of the others. So if we tried knit to HTML slidey, you can get an idea of what the slidey format looks like. And it has a different look and feel. So here's what that looks like, and it gives you some information about swiping and stuff. So it's just another kind of slide format. You can knit to Beamer, so that's the PDF format. And there's some really neat things that you can do with all of these templates and stuff, and that's almost another whole class in and of itself, but here's what they look like in that sort of PDF format. And you'll notice some of this stuff went off the screen. So sometimes you really go down the rabbit hole formatting. So sometimes I give up and I just produce it somewhere else and then just cut and paste it back in. But yeah, try it. So that's why I was really excited to finally see PowerPoint, because I figured, okay, I can probably knit 80% of what I need to do to PowerPoint. Anything I can't get to work, I can always just cut and paste it in from somewhere else. But you want to try? Okay, I haven't tried this, so okay, drum roll. We'll see what happens. I have not tried this one, and I may need to install a package. Actually, it may come back and tell me I need to do something. I haven't tried this one. Did that work? No, it worked. It looks like it crashed. It may not be live yet. Like I said, it's brand new. It's looking like it's not working. So anyway, but it's coming. So I think it's available right now. I haven't looked recently. It was available in the RStudio preview version. I don't know if anybody's ever played with that. Usually when I download RStudio, I try to install the actual production version. That's the one that's been vetted. But there actually is a in development, like beta test version. So like if you're really wanting to be on the sort of the leading bleeding edge of what's coming in RStudio, you can do that and download it knowing that stuff's going to probably break. So anyway. Okay, so I haven't tried that one, but yes, question. Oh. All right, so let's try that. Okay. All right, so PowerPoint, all one word, and then underscore. All right. Ah, okay. Thank you. Oh, so you have to download the file. All right. Oh, this is so cool. I've never done this before. All right. It doesn't take much to, like, get me, really. Oh, this is so cool. All right. This is the kind of stuff that I do when I'm like, I don't want to clean my house. Yes. Oh, I have to click Enable Editing. So, yep. So hopefully this is giving you guys some ideas on your final presentations and so forth. All right. So, okay, so that's oh, yeah. So type, PowerPoint, and that's the underscore presentation. So I'll write it back up here so you guys have it. So output, and then a colon, space, PowerPoint.
And then you hit the PowerPoint?
Yes.
I did it. You can't have two.
Oh, yeah. I went ahead and deleted all of the others, so it's just output, colon, PowerPoint, underscore presentation. And then I did click knit to PowerPoint. All right. So I've got a couple more things to show you guys. All right, so let me pass forward through the stuff. Okay, Markdown. All right. So Markdown options. Every now and then, just to let you know, when you start playing with this on your own, if you create your own workspaces in RStudio Cloud, if you're loading something that you haven't done before, every now and then it'll come back and say, hey, in order for this to work, you need to download these following packages, and just click yes, and RStudio Cloud will download these for you. By the way, this will work with RStudio locally on your computer as well if you're trying to do something and a package is needed. So it should prompt you. Okay, so we talked about these different options. We checked that. The YAML, oh, this is one other thing. So that YAML piece actually created the title slide. So let me go back and show that. So this part here, the title, author, and date. So when I first knitted this, I'll just go back to the HTML, the very, very first slide. So the information that's on that title slide, that piece you have to actually type into that YAML header part. So the title, your name, and the date, that first slide is actually created with this piece up here. So forgot to mention that. Yeah, so you can use the markup or markdown character. So you could make something bold, italics. I mean, you could put all that in there as well. Yep. All right. So these are the different slide formats. We tried other formats, and we actually got PowerPoint to work. So yay, thank you. All right, go ahead and open up the third one. All right, so this is the part that I think sometimes this is where RMarkdown really shines, in that I can now parameterize my document to write different reports with the same document. So we've built this thing. We started off with some code, we added some text, we've added some labels, we've marked up our text, and you'll notice in this particular data set that we have information on the males, the females, and the infants. So it might be interesting to run this and look at, okay, what does it look like for just the males? What do the statistics look like for just the females? And so one way to do that is this top part here where it says param. So I've got this blown up a little bit so you can actually see it. All right, so in the YAML header, in addition to title, author, date, and in this case I'm just going to go to HTML, but there's another keyword that you can use, params. And then you need to know the variable, and the variable in the data set was sex. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set this up initially to do it for just the males. So I'm predefining, I'm setting sex equal to male. All right, so that's in the header. Then later on in the document, so I'm adding a parameter. Then in the document, I can actually do some things. So after the part where I read in the data, there's a little piece of code that I added, and I'm using the filter function. Have you guys seen that? That's it from Deep Learning. Some, yes, no. All right, so it is a function just like select. Select selects columns in a data set. Filter is a way to select rows based on some criterion. So what this is saying is filter out, give me only the rows or only the cases, the abalones, for which sex equals this parameter sex variable, which I predefined to be male. So this is like my sort of it's the variable for male. So what happens in the YAML code at the top, I set parameter sex equal to male, and then everywhere in the document I just write parameter sex, because then if I want to run this for something else, and I used it again here in inline code. Then later, so let's try this. All right, so I've got sex equal to male. So go ahead and click knit to HTML, and we'll take a look at what this looks like. And everywhere that I've got an M is my indicator. So I put it in here several places. So this is a glimpse only for the males. Right, so you'll notice up here in sex, it just all of these are M's. I don't have any F's or I's anymore. Here's the summary of the abalone data, and trust me, these numbers look different than it did in the previous one that we ran. Here's the plot of just the rings. So notice I don't have a plot now for females or infants because they're no longer in my data set. So I'm just getting a plot for the males. The other thing is the number of rings before I know ranged from 1 to 29. These only range from 3 to 27. And down here at the bottom, this little regression output, if you go back and look at what we had before, these regression, intercept, and slope terms are all different. So that's for the males. All right, so let's close that. Now, come up here and instead of M, type F and reknit it. So that took all of what? 10 seconds? And so I've now got a report for the males. Here's a report for the females. And so the plot looks a little bit different. The number of rings is now from 5 to 29. These intercept and slope terms. So this is a fantastic way to sort of begin to automate things and quickly run updates. All right, but maybe there's a better way. All right, so rather than coming in here and typing this in, this params term also is something significant in Knitter. So back over here where I click knit, there's a button here for knit with parameters. So if you click on this one, it opens up a little window, and now I can actually, like, let's go ahead and type in I, and it is a capital I, for the infants. And now if I click knit, so notice it didn't actually change here, but it changed like dynamically. And so as it's knitting, it didn't go back and change the YAML header, but it knew, oh, okay, I'm substituting F now for I. Here's the report for the infants. Yes.
So I noticed that there was a large space in that box. Does that mean you can add multiple parameters?
You can. I'll admit right now I can't remember exactly how to set it up for multiple parameters, but you can. All right, so let me show one other piece. So that was 3A. Click on 3B, RMarkdown 3B. And so the YAML header here changes a little bit. And so what you're seeing is just the barest preview of Shiny. So this little box that popped up, it's actually running Shiny under the hood. And so this is fine, M, F, and I. Hopefully people won't mistype this, although if you type a lowercase, this will probably fail. So case matters. But you can imagine, suppose you wanted to have somebody, okay, please give me the report for Wyoming, right? Or pick something that people are probably going to misspell, right? Like myself, I'm always mistyping things. So wouldn't it be awesome if I could pre-populate with all the parameters, and maybe there are certain parameters and reports I don't want people to run. You know, maybe that data's in there, but I'm going to hide it. Like, I'm going to make it really user-friendly, and we're just going to let people look at the data I want them to look at. So you can start to set up these things, and I don't want to get too far because you could spend all night just talking about YAML up stuff. But you can set up a label, a value, an input, and a choices. And so this is beginning to give you a little glimpse into what Shiny programming begins to look like. And so what you're building here is a pick list box, if you've ever done that, or a pull-down list. And you're telling it the choices here are M, F, and I. And so if you knit this one with parameters, so this is RMarkdown 3B. So now if we say knit with parameters, the box comes up, and now I've got a little pull-down menu. And so I don't have to worry about someone mistyping or typing in lowercase instead of uppercase. Yeah, so you've got to have like the label, that's like the label at the top of the box. You can pre-populate it with a default, so like if they don't pick anything, it defaults to M. The input is a select, and then the choices list the choices that'll show up in that box. And I know there's a lot more to it. There's all kinds of ways to customize this, but exactly. Yeah, so I didn't change anything. So all of this back in the body of the document, that's all exactly the same. Good question. Yes, sir.
What if you were working multiple data frames? Like if you changed, Apple 1 to Apple 2 because you didn't want to write over that or something like that? Would you?
Well, you'd have to have a different data set loaded here. So I mean, you could do that. Yeah. Right. So actually, it's a good point. I think, and I have seen this done where the parameter up here is actually the data set. So there are ways to do that. It gets a little bit trickier because then you've got to have the options down here that actually you have to have like the files listed somewhere so that it knows which file to pull. But yes, you could do that. Good point. All right, let's do one more, and then, all right, so open RMarkdown 4A. So this is going to give you a chance to play around with a dashboard. And so we took a look at this, right? I brought you up. But if you click on this one here for the formats, this is back at the rmarkdown.rstudio.com. When you click on formats, here's all the different formats. And so you guys have mostly played with HTML. We did PDF, Word. ODT, by the way, is open document text. So if you're vehemently anti-Microsoft and you don't want to use Microsoft Word, you can knit to ODT, which is an open Office document format. Anyway. RTF is another one that's kind of benign, that's not tied to Microsoft. There's actually, instead of doing RMarkdown, you can go to generic Markdown. Anyway, here's like the different slide formats. You saw IO slides, Slidey, Beamer, and PowerPoint. There's another one, and you have to actually download the Reveal JS package, but it has some neat formatting things. Let's see if they have a picture here of what. So like it kind of has another different look and feel. So so if you're interested in Reveal.js. Here are some of the articles that we talked about. Alex mentioned Elsevier. Here's American Chemical Society. So if I was still publishing in ACS, I could do that straight from here. Journal of Statistics, and there's actually a ton more. The one I'm going to have you guys play with next is Flex Dashboard, but I encourage you to take a look. So here's Book Down, if you want to write a book. Some more things on making websites. If you want to make a blog, anybody in here played with that? I'm trying right now. I started a little tiny blog. I don't really have much on it yet. Actually, one of the things I want to post is how to use RMarkdown with SAS. I'm actually sort of working on that. But before I do that, I'm trying to figure out how to get it linked with our bloggers. And to do that, I have to create something called a blog roll, and I'm still trying to figure out how to do that. So anyway, maybe eventually I will be listed on our bloggers. We'll see. Package down if you're making packages. I mentioned the Tufty, GitHub. There's some other things. And then there's some others. These are actually a lot of fun, especially if you're playing with websites or you're just creating documents in HTML. There's one here called HTML Pretty. So for creating pretty documents with the Pretty Doc package. And so they have like some different formats and examples. Let's see. Hopefully they got a gallery. What? So like here's like an idea. So this is something called Cayman theme. Here's one in something called Tactile. There's another one called Architect. So you get the idea. So once you've got the idea, the rest of this is just sort of wrapping style around it. That's really what it's doing. Under the hood, there's actually CSS, the custom style sheets for HTML. There's Vitae. I didn't really, so there actually is a link. Alex was telling me about this at dinner. So there's a way to do resume and CV templates. This is new. I haven't played with this one. This is another presentation format called Shower. I tested it out. I haven't played with it yet. All right. Okay. So dashboards. Let me actually show you guys a couple other dashboards. So here's Flex Dashboard. And they have some fantastic examples out here, and I encourage you guys to take a look at them. So they have some of these templates and examples. So like this one here, well, this has some shiny in it, but like this one, let's see what this one does. And this is from JJ Allaire. He's kind of the founder of RStudio. So it's got an interactive little pull-down menu here. So we're looking at something with different clusters. And so up here is a heat map. Down here, parallel coordinates, data for a given cluster. But this is basically shiny, but in a dashboard setting. Oops. Did I lose it? Oh, let me get back. All right. And for this to work, you actually do have to install the Flex Dashboard package. I've already done that, so it should be installed in the workspace that we're in. But once you get it installed, then when you come in here under Markdown, you can say From Template, and it'll list Flex Dashboard as the template to start with instead of a document. And then there's others in here. And then there's some other information and pieces in here. There's lots of different layouts. And this gets a little confusing, and I'll admit I'm still not great with this. But I've got two examples that you guys can leave with tonight to play with. And so instead of having 2 hashtags, it actually starts with 3 hashtags. So just like we had sections in our document, and then we had sections that were individual slides, in a dashboard, the sections create like pieces of the square, depending on where you put them in the dashboard. And instead of 2 hashtags, it's 3. So like in this case, there's 3 hashtags for chart 1, and then whatever's in that R code chunk will define what goes into chart 1. And then there's 3 hashtags for chart 2, and then anything it defines goes into chart 2. Yeah, so this is showing an example where things are in a single column and it's filled out. So that's why it says vertical layout fill. Here's one that is still a vertical layout, but you can actually scroll. So if you have more stuff than will fit on one page, you could just continue to scroll. Here's one with multiple columns. The example I'm going to show you has this where there's like one big chart and then 2 little ones on the side. So it's like 2 columns, but the second column has 2 rows. So you're starting to think like laying out a table. And then here's one that sort of flips that where we've got 2 rows, but the second row has 2 columns in it. And there's lots more, so there's a whole bunch of other examples. So what I'm giving you guys tonight is just the tip of the iceberg, as they say. All right, so in this one, I've got it, the first one, so 4A. So we've got Flex Dashboard. The orientation is columns, and I've got it using this default fill. And now when I click on knit, instead of saying knit to HTML, it says knit to Flex Dashboard, because this is a very specific kind of HTML. And so if we knit that, and I've only got some of the pieces from the previous code. It doesn't include everything. And so this is like my title that came out of the YAML header code. And so I've got a title here for Glimpse of Abalone Data, so that's that glimpse. And it's, if I scroll this around, I can maybe make it work a little bit, but it's, it's jamming things together, so I'd have to play with formatting. Here's my plot on top, and then here's that little regression table. And so those pieces are in here. So the setup looks similar to what I had before, about the only thing was I added the Flex Dashboard package. So it loads the data. And then the other thing is there are some options. So just like you can have knitter options, with Flex Dashboard in the curly brackets, like I can say, okay, I want that first column to be, it says 450. I think the idea is the full window is 1,000. And so 450 says basically give me 45% of my window as that first column, and then what's left would be the 55%, which is what this is. So that's the second column. And then within that, the first row is that plot, and the second row is the regression table. And then in 4B, I kind of flipped it. So with 4B, I'm setting up the orientation in rows, and so row 1 is going to have a glimpse of that abalone data because I needed more room to spread out. And then the second row is going to have 2 columns with the scatter plot and the regression. And so if I knit this one, you get just a slightly different layout. No. So the dashboard, Flex Dashboard isn't interactive. That's where you have to learn Shiny. So, it's just a static presentation. So it's kind of a nice way, though. You could begin to think about this if you wanted to build out. I don't know that you could take it all the way to poster format. I'm not sure about size. Like if you could actually use this to make a whole poster and create a PDF. I haven't read enough about dashboards, but if you're wanting to just make a really quick, simple summary, send someone an HTML file, maybe they don't have the software, or you want to post it out on the website, and then periodically you update it and just say, hey, here's the latest and the greatest on whatever. So. Maybe. That's a good question. So, yes.
Going back to number 4A.
Yes.
How would you do, so you have your 3 different graphics.
Mm-hmm.
What if you wanted your second one to be the largest picture graphic on your
All right, so let me knit it again. So, okay, let's try it. So for this one, you wanted to make which part? Maybe make that top plot a little bit bigger?
Switch that with your variable.
So put it over here?
Yes.
Okay. So all you need to do is just kind of move it. So this piece here, so everything from the R code chunk up to this title, Glimpse of Abalone Data. So I'm going to copy that, and let's put it. Yeah, so I'll put that down here, and then I'm going to take this one and put it back up here. So now under the first column, I've got the plot, and then in the second, and I've got to get rid of the extra backticks. This is the part about cutting and pasting that gets kind of hard, so you got to watch for those backticks. And now I've got the glimpse and the regression, so let's see how that goes. So move the plot to the left, and we could maybe make it a little bit bigger. So, and then the glimpse is there. And the other thing is, and while it doesn't do a good job, it just kind of wraps, within the space that it has, it does at least give you a little automatic scroll bar. And I guess there is kind of a scroll bar this way, but anyway. So there's a few things. I mean, if you've ever, and you probably haven't, but if you've ever had to write HTML code from scratch to do this, it's a nightmare. And I don't know, let's see if it'll let me. I don't know if you've ever done this. If you left click on a web page, you can actually say view page source. So, okay. So it's not really going to, this one's not really going to show me, but probably because it's like a temporary view window. But trust me, it's messy. So, yeah.
Can you scroll down in your code?
Sure.
How about that?
Okay.
That thing.
Okay, so this is the setup.
How do you know how many dashes to put there? Underneath column. I'm assuming that's what breaks between the things.
So I don't think it has to be that big. I think these could be smaller. Let's just try it.
So it's not like a staple.
I don't think so. Well, let's just try it. I'll admit I haven't done a lot with the formatting and dashboards. I've just sort of played with them. I think it just has to be several dashes to indicate there's a break, like this is a new column. So yeah, I don't think the number of dashes. I suspect it's got to be more than 3. But this is the part that's important. Is this part you have to give it column, and so it knows everything after this is the first column, and then this specifies the second column. Yeah, so all of this that follows after this piece is what goes in that first column, and then everything that comes after this is all in the second column, but the second column is divided into 2 rows, and the rows are indicated by these 3 hash marks. So I admit it, and there's probably a lot more to it. I'll admit I have not read everything on dashboards, but yeah.
If you want to publish the results in the website, the page.
Yeah, so I mean, once you've got the HTML, so and I've been glossing over this, but over here now in our files, we've got a whole bunch of HTML. So our Markdown for a HTML, if I click on this, I can actually say view in web browser. So you can put this out anywhere on the web that someone could see. And I didn't mention this. Let me see if it has this option. So if I click, let's try this. Or is it this one? All right, so there is a little button over here on the very, very far right. It's this funky looking little circle with 2 little curves around it. If you click Publish Document, and I have not tested this from inside RStudio, so you have to add some additional packages. Let's see. Anybody in here ever looked at RPubs? Okay, so there's rpubs.com. Write this up here, R, and it's free. I actually know people who require their students to publish their homework out on RPubs. And so if you do that, once you do this, you click RPubs, and you have to have an account, and you click Publish. I haven't logged into mine in so long. I don't want to test it right now because I'll probably not remember. Yeah, so it's more an exercise. You know, it's just the exercise to do it. So you're right, it's not secure. There's other ways. But here's rpubs.com, and so you can begin to see what people are doing. Like, here's somebody's quiz. But you're right. Yes, it's completely open. So here's somebody's quiz. Obviously not in English. But there's all kinds of things, and a lot of times people put different things. So I don't know. Here's something, a paper that somebody wrote for a project. It says on population health and economy. So sometimes it's actually kind of interesting just to come out here and poke around, and sometimes you might, oh, that looks really cool, like this one. How the heck did they do that? Right? So this is a, so. Yeah, okay, so it's interesting. I don't know what this is about, but anyway. But it has a neat graph. Yeah. Buster, I don't know, support. Oh, this is something that looks like beer. Okay. Anyway, so you get the idea, but there's all kinds of things that you can do. But anyway, but RStudio, this is true with the RStudio that's on your local machine too. You can publish to our pubs. There was another one here that when it popped up, the other one said RS Connect, and but that's a paid account. But I do think companies and stuff pay for those sometimes. All right, so I'm going to kind of stop there. I kind of want to open it up for questions, anything else you guys want to see, and then I'm going to let Alex take about 15 minutes to talk a little bit about Shiny too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the best cable, if whatever you're putting in to cable, if it comes out as like a table format, so let me go back to one of the just plain documents. The other thing is there's a little, it looks like 2 arrows. If I click on that, I can actually scroll through and find my document. So let me go back to like RMarkdown 1. So when I was here and I did the knit to Word, so let me see if I can open the Word document. It does a decent job of making a table. Oh, I already had it open. Sorry, I guess I opened it twice. But this is actually in Microsoft Word as an honest-to-goodness table. Mm-hmm. Correct. So when I'm in here, so like if I select on that, I can actually come into design. I could change my borders. I could pick a couple of cells. I could change the shading. So you've got all the standard editing capability. There's also another nifty, there's a word for you, nifty package. I guess I am dating myself now, called Cable, let's see, let me get this up, Kable Extra. Creating awesome HTML tables with knitter cable and cable extra. Pardon? Yeah, there are some things that work and some things that don't, but anyway, there are some different packages. That's a nut I'm still trying to crack. So much beyond a basic table. Usually what I do, it's the same sort of thing with like PowerPoint or something. I get like 80% of what I want in the table the way I want it from cable, and then I might come back and customize my headers and, that kind of stuff. I just go ahead and just do that in Microsoft Word. So I'm not completely soup to nuts or Markdown, but I'm close. So anything else you guys want to see or play around with or test out?
One question I have, I guess, for everybody sitting out here who will be making slides for your final presentation, not in PowerPoint. Do you know how to make things bold, italicized, underlined? How to do things like you know where in the code it might change color or style of some of the words, indicate like which function you might be using? Could y'all pick up on that?
So let's try it, actually. That's a good point. So since we're in here, go ahead and click on File, New File. And let's just make a really simple, click on RMarkdown and call it whatever you want to call it. author, me. I could default to HTML, but go ahead and play around with Word if you like. And we'll say OK. And when you create these, it's kind of nice. It actually comes up with just a basic document to sort of start with. So it goes ahead and gives you some stuff. Then you could just delete the whole thing and start from scratch, or you could just take this and edit it. And so, like, this is our Markdown. So yeah, this is me changing the header. I can't type, changing. I wish I had spell check, like Microsoft Word. Well, there actually technically is one. It's up here. Let's see, where is it? Under Edit, check spelling. So you kind of can do it. It's just it doesn't do it on the fly, and so a lot of times I forget to do that. But try typing some other things. So let's see. Let's add a list. And so if I add a list, you could come in here, and you can either usually do like an asterisk or a dash and say, you know, this is item 1, item 2, if I can type. And then if you do 4 spaces and come over sub item 1. And I don't know if you caught that. Because I had indented, when I hit return, it stays indented, which is actually kind of handy. I don't have to keep typing the 4 spaces. Here's an R code chunk. This is a summary of the built-in data set called cars. Let's see. What are some other really cool things? Here is a word in italics. So here's a little secret that I learned. I think if you highlight the whole word and then type the formatting command, so italics would be 1 asterisk or an underscore. So if I say shift underscore, it automatically puts it at the beginning and the end. And for a single word, that's not so bad. But suppose for some reason I wanted like all of this in italics, I could just highlight the whole thing and then do that. So that's kind of a handy way. Mm. Yeah, so adding this space above and below the list, I think if I leave that space out, sometimes it won't knit correctly. So let me try that. So knit to H. Oh, and it'll ask me. So this is my test document. Yeah, there are some odd things, and sometimes carriage returns, like adding that extra line, is needed. So notice it didn't work. So exactly, if I okay, what does that do? Because I know I had the carriage return in there. That should work. I've never had to add the spaces before, but maybe that's something new. Yeah, that it did work, but it's not a bad idea to do it just to make sure that you know. Yep, this is a clear new line. There's some other weird things like that sometimes happen, like if you really get into formatting tables. Right. Okay, cool. Yes. Awesome. So now you are talking about CSS. That's basically custom style sheets. There are ways to do that, and you can attach that style sheet, but that's like HTML. I don't know of any way to do it like on the fly inside RMarkdown. Much outside. By the way, there is no Markdown for underlining. It just does not exist. I've tried. I have dug for that one. Nope, there's no underlining. I don't really know why. but there isn't. You can do bold, you can do italics. Oh, and you can do the proportional font. So like here's a word in italics. Here is a word I want in typeface. And you put the little backticks at the beginning and the end, and so it usually looks like I think it switches to like Courier or something like that. It goes from proportional to non-proportional font, which is kind of handy for like variable names and things like that you want to stand out.
Go back to your code. Take a section of text. Maybe add a list.
Mhm.
All right, you want to, in the beginning of that, do an open caret.
Oh. Can I do undo? I have no idea what just happened. Okay, sorry. There's undo. My browser, as a result, used to use keyboard shortcuts. Okay, Control Z. No? Whatever.
It'll work once you have your cursor in there.
All right. What were you asking me to do? I'm sorry.
Do an open caret.
Oh, okay.
Then you're going to do the letter P. Let's see. Backspace, you want to do style, P style, as one word. Equals.
Okay.
Quotation marks, color, colon, red, close quotation marks. Close caret.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
All right, go to the end, open caret, P.
All right. So this is HTML. This is hypertext markup language. It only works, though, I think, if you're going to HTML. If you knit to Word or PDF, I don't think this works. But HTML, it should work.
Oh, actually,
Yeah.
space style. Sorry. It's
Oh.
been a long time since I've done computer science. Okay.
That's okay. I don't remember either. And it's probably if it doesn't recognize it as HTML, I think it just prints to the screen. Yeah, it just shows up as text. So okay, so is it P what?
Space style.
All right, we're gonna try this again.
Your friend is Stack Overflow.
Yeah, have you guys looked at Stack Overflow? And what I love about Stack Overflow, and it's kind of scary, is you'll post something, and it's 2 a.m, and you'll get a response. Like, well, most people are halfway decent, but that's the thing. We were talking about this before, the whole argument about, well, we need SAS or SPSS. We need like known, vetted software, right? But if you want to change anything, it's going to take like an act of Congress to get something changed. Whereas with R, if you don't like something, trust me, there's somebody out there that's probably fixed it, written a piece of code to do it. There's like an infinite number of people out there to help you. But anyway, okay, well, cool. Thank you, Alex.
You can also look up HTML code. It's the same thing for underline if you want to underline.
Oh, okay. But yeah. Yes. Yeah, so you have to type in wrong button. Oh, it's not going to let me do it. But yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then, wait, sorry. 1, 2, 3, I think I accidentally, but it worked. But I know it is supposed to be 4. I wonder if they've added some leniency to that, but formally the Markdown rule is 4 spaces. So, but it actually worked before, so interesting.
HTML doesn't seem to work on headers.
Interesting.
Writing their own HTML.
Yeah.
The hashtags in front, that in the background is being transferred into HTML or to LaTeX, another markup language, so it's not going to work. Because you're trying to, it's basically creating the HTML in the background, and you're trying to put HTML around HTML, and it's not going to work.
So there's all kinds of, again, sort of Google is your friend, but there are all kinds of things out here for beginning to do this. So let's see, if I type in add CSS to our Markdown. So there's ways to do this. So there's actually a whole thing in the bookdown.org and that RMarkdown book on customizing style sheets, basically. But again, this is for HTML. So like here's an example where he's created a style sheet called styles.css, and they're linking to it in the YAML header. Then inside this styles.css, this little piece of code here, this is CSS code. So now you really are becoming kind of an HTML web style programmer. The other thing that's kind of nice, though, if you Google around enough, sometimes you'll find someone who set up a style sheet that you like, and you just download that file, attach it, and you don't actually have to write CSS code. So thank God. I've done like this much, and I don't want to write CSS code.
Yeah.